Drywall repair comes in all shapes and sizes, and in this video I'll be covering some of the basics of drywall repair with small hole repair. I'll also be covering a unique situation where you might have two holes right next to each other. How do you handle that? Well, let's find out. It doesn't matter what size hole you have in your wall, the very first step that you always want to take is to clean up your hole. You need to make sure that you don't have any drywall sticking out away from the wall before you start your repair. Now I like to use a 4-inch knife when I do drywall. I typically use just a 4-inch knife in order to get the job done. Just use that knife and scrape away or tear away with your hands any excess that's sticking out of the hole. With that done, we can move on to step 2. Take that knife, load it with your mud, and put it in the hole. Be generous with your application. Don't be afraid to skimp on it. Honestly, you need enough to fill the hole properly so that you can finish the hole properly. Clean up any excess that you have from this first application, and you want to make sure that you just let it dry. Now that dry time is going to vary depending on the product that you use. If you use like one of those quick drying spackles, it could be 30 to 45 minutes. Typically with a joint compound like this, it's going to take several hours depending upon the size of your hole. But let it dry before you go to your second application. But you may have a situation where you have two holes that are really close to each other. If there's enough drywall between the two of them, my rule of thumb is if you have at least 3/4 of an inch or so in between the two, you can follow the same process for that small hole. But if they're a little bit closer, there's another step that I add into the process just to add some extra strength to the wall. Apply mud all around the surface. Cut a piece of drywall tape to the size that you need to cover the holes that you're repairing. Put your tape down on top of the mud that you spread across those holes and push it down gently. Now, holding the one end, take your putty knife and smooth it out. Make sure you smooth it out in both directions so it's flush against the wall. Clean up the mud that's there and just cover the top lightly. It's very important with any type of drywall repair that you let your joint compound or your spackle dry appropriately. For the sake of this video, I have not let mine dry properly, but I'm moving on to the next step, which is to put our next coat and our final coat of mud on the wall. Before you put your second coat on, I highly suggest that you lightly sand any rough areas off so that you don't just add additional mud on top and create a bigger sanding problem for you after. For this final coat, you don't want to put the mud on too thick. You just need to skim coat over the whole thing. Now I made my life a little bit harder here because my two double hole examples are right on top of each other. I should have grabbed a larger knife for this one in order to get the job done the proper way, but I kind of worked around it the best that I could with a 4-incher. You might run into a very similar situation if you don't have a wider 6-inch or bigger knife for these larger areas where you have multiple in the same area, like a cluster of holes. If you find that you have ridges or drag lines through your mud when you're done, kind of like this, don't worry. Once things dry, this is where the sanding is going to help you clean things up before you prime and paint. But what if you have a bigger hole in your drywall that you need to repair? Following this process for these little holes might not work if somebody's put their fist through your wall. If you need help with that size hole, check out this video. Until the next time, keep doing it yourself.